the sojourn in Egypt, the slavery, Moses and the Exodus, the conquest of the Promised Land is all there in one nice, neat line, but it's way too early.
I don't believe there was a single event that we can call the Exodus.
This person can't have seen all this. He imagined it.
I'm very much against chronological revisionism.
There is nothing else like this in the whole of Egyptian history.
Really?
Nothing at all.
When you put those cities side by side, the biblical account and the archaeology match extremely well.
So far, there is no documented evidence about the Exodus.
Exodus did not happen in the way that it is described in the text.
How can we prove that?
You look for a collapse in Egyptian civilization, and that's where you'll find Moses and the Exodus.
If we can prove there even was an Exodus.
I think everybody in the field is biased, one way or another.
Whether it was true, it is true. And those are two different things.
Ani, Ana, and Anel. Israel. Israel.
There's a high probability that we're looking here at Joshua's conquest.
I hate to disappoint people, but we have no evidence for a single mass migration of people from one country coming into another country.
There are no archaeological sources that could prove this took place.
We have no evidence.
If people are telling us that there was no Jericho at the time that Joshua conquered the Promised Land, and therefore Joshua is a piece of fiction, and therefore the conquest is a piece of fiction, why don't we ask the simple question, when was Jericho destroyed?
In terms of reconstructing ancient history, a lot hinges on the answers.
Do you think this is Joseph?
Either it is Joseph or it's somebody remarkably the same.
We have tombs that are clearly those of foreigners, Semites. We can tell this by the pottery, by the kind of weapons. These are not Egyptian-type daggers. They have donkeys in some cases buried with them. This was not an Egyptian practice.
This is real evidence for the time when the Israelites were in Egypt as slaves.
We were slaves? Why? I mean, if you're going to dream up a story, surely you'd come up with a better one than that.
Look at your evidence and come to a conclusion based on the evidence.
So you have a connection between the Bible story and these tablets.
We have a name that's identical. We have a tablet coming out of the ground with the name Jabin on it. And in the story of Joshua, Joshua killed King Jabin of Hatzor.
Why is it that we've never heard of these finds?
Because in the scheme that's used by scholars to date all these events, they're way too early.
We may be wrong 10 years here and 10 years there, but there's no way, to shift centuries.
Because it would undo a lot of their books, wouldn't it?
It certainly would, yes.
Hey everybody, how are we doing this morning? Good to see you all here. Can you hear me this morning? I changed the setup a little bit because we've been doing some work here at the church on our streaming capabilities, and I haven't had a chance to actually fully test it out. But let's see what we got going on here. I got a few things happening, got some new stuff going on. Am I in the right spot? Yes, I am. Okay, so welcome. Great to see you all here. Rebecca, thank you very much. Appreciate that. Let's see. Keith and Marcia this morning. Good morning. Wendy, good to see you this morning. Brianna, good to see you this morning. All right, let me turn this heater on. Up here in New York, we have a tendency of experiencing more than one season in one day, which is very, very annoying. And I think this morning we've had both early spring and eventually we'll have summer at some point in time, even though it sort of is summer. All right, so let's do a couple things here. So a couple things to make you aware of. So a couple things I want to tell you about is if you are interested in archaeology or history, that video clip that you just saw before things started, I really, really recommend you checking out Thinking Man Films. They're called the Pattern of Evidence movies. They have one for the Exodus, which is absolutely fantastic. A little tinny. Okay, so let me see if I can fix that. Thank you, Ashley. Appreciate it. Let's see if that can fatten me up a little bit. Make me. Nah, that's what Twinkies are for. Okay, so I really recommend you checking out Thinking Man Films. They have patterns of evidence for Exodus, patterns of evidence for the Moses authorship of the Torah. I don't know if you're aware of this, but there's a group of scholars trying to claim that Moses did not actually write the Torah, or that he couldn't have written the Torah, which is very disturbing in a lot of different ways. So that movie looks into that accusation right there. And then basically there's another one that's just come out. It's a two-parter, and it's patterns of evidence for the Red Sea miracles, what it's called. And what it does is it deals with the idea of where did the Jewish people, the Hebrews, cross what Scripture refers to as the Red Sea. Where did that happen? Because it's not agreed upon by any stretch of the imagination. So he deals with that, and it's just really well done through science and archaeology, and using both secular and religious scholarships on for all of his work. Really, really well done. Thinking Man Films. I really recommend you looking into that. Okay, so this Thursday night, tomorrow night, from 6:30 to 7, if you're interested, we are hosting a parking lot prayer meeting here with some live worship, some opportunities for people to pray on various topics, and we really would like to invite you to come up. We're only setting it up basically for an hour, so that if you're bringing your kids with you, you don't have to worry about them being stuck in a car for an insane length of time. So that's going to be happening tomorrow night here at River of Life Fellowship, corner of Route 12 and Number 3 Road, 6:30 to 7:30. Come on down; should be a good time. All right, so something else that's going on. I want to remind you that there are 16 chapters in the book of 1 Corinthians. We're on chapter 9, so we get basically 7 weeks left. As much as I want to spend a ton of time on things like the gifts of the Spirit and stuff like that, I'm not going to. For a couple of different reasons. We're going to be getting into that more in the next section of where I want to take this study next. So we will be continuing this between meals even after the COVID stuff is done. This is just a great. I think this is a really good platform. You guys seem to really be liking it. And I want to get into some things that I've been looking into for quite a while now. And this is going to be happening about mid-July. We're going to be getting into this. Sarah, Pat, good to see you. Bill and Barb, good to see you guys here. So what's going to be happening is in about mid-July, I'm going to start dealing with a topic. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be getting into something that has been kind of working its way into the church for the last probably few decades, but it's really become like in the forefront today, and it's the only way that I can describe it is the mixing of New Age, pagan, and Eastern mystic practices with Christianity. This is happening in the church. It's happening at an alarming rate. Now, before I became a Christian, I came from witchcraft. That's what I was into, what I did for a number of years before I became a Christian. I was very anti-God. I was very anti-church. I thought it was all just a bunch of nonsense and stupidity. I was too smart to be a Christian. Is kind of the way I looked at it. Boy, was I not smart at all. But this is working its way into the church, and the thing that alarms people like myself the most is how readily so many in the church are accepting it and literally embracing it with open arms, without questioning it at all. And when I look at the Bible and the clear teachings of Scripture, the mistake that is happening here is so right in front of us. It's really hard to wrap my head around how people are so openly just not paying attention to this at all. And the problem is this is coming from big name people. So what I'm doing right now is I'm getting all of my resources together. I'm gathering video clips. I'm getting excerpts from their books. I'm doing a lot of reading, a lot of listening on Audible and things like that to try to work my way through as much of their material as possible. So, because I want to bring it to you in their words, not my opinion. That's very important when you're trying to deal with what can only be described as false teaching. But just to give you an idea, I don't want to give you a ton of information, but the group that we're going to be focusing on is called the New Apostolic Reformation. And they are a lot of big name people. And this is where I just stop and think, how is it that so many in the church are not seeing this? So I want to approach this in a very sober way. I don't want to be approached in an accusing tone or like a holier than thou kind of a thing. That's not what I'm going for. We're going to look at the teaching coming from these individuals, and we're going to compare it to Scripture. It's either going to line up or it won't. Given the nature of what we're talking about, you can clearly tell that it's not going to. Now, some of the names that we're going to be talking about is really simple. Bill Johnson, Chris Valentin, Benny Hinn, Todd Bentley, Todd White, Kenneth Copeland, just to name a few. These are groups in what is commonly referred to as the New Apostolic Reformation. Now, they say that that's not a real group and that's not what they really call themselves, although they continually call themselves that by that name. So it's strange all the way around. So this is what's happening with that, and we'll be getting into that about mid-July. And that's about all I want to give you right now as far as material. I might recommend a couple of books for you to look at as we get going down the road, and I may post some links to various teachers to kind of help you get your mind wrapped around where we're headed. But that's happening in mid-July, so that's enough of that. Let's jump into today's study. We are still walking through the book of 1 Corinthians. We are in chapter 9. And this is a very interesting section of Scripture, and I want to preface something. So the bulk of this section of Scripture deals with the provision made to ministers of the gospel, and I toyed around with the idea of not touching on this at all because I'm a full-time pastor. So this you can easily run into the issue of this looking and sounding very self-serving. But I want to approach this in a couple different ways. There's 3 basic points that I want to deal with today in regard to the Scripture. We're not going to read through the whole section. I just want to deal with 3 sections of this because I think it makes the point a little bit easier, a little bit more plainly, and we don't have to mess around with too many things. So the first thing I want to look at here is verses 7 through 14, and it's the material support for the ministry and the minister. Okay, so let's take a look at this. So it reads like this. So did you ever hear of a soldier paying his own expenses? It's a great question, right? Or a farmer planting a vineyard without eating its grapes? Who shepherds a flock without drinking some of the milk? What I am saying is not based merely on human authority, because the Torah says the same thing. Let's see. Yep. For in the Torah, the Torah of Moses, it is written, "You are not to put a muzzle on an ox while it's treading out the grain. If God is concerned about the cattle, all the more does he say this for your sakes. Yes, it was written for us," meaning that he who plows and he who threshes should work expecting to get a share of the crop. If we have sown spiritual seed among you, is it too much if we reap a material harvest from you? If others are sharing in this right to be supported by you, don't we have a greater claim to it? So we'll get into this to what he's actually saying right there here in just a second. It says, but we don't make use of this right. Rather, we put up with all kinds of things so as not to impede any way the good news about the Messiah. Don't you know that those who work in the temple get their food from the temple, and those who serve at the altar get a share of the sacrifices offered there? In the same way, the Lord directed that those who proclaim the good news should get their living from the gospel. Okay, so the basic conversation here is around the material support of the minister. Now, it's really important to understand that we're not talking about the tithe here. We're talking about the material support of the minister and their meeting their physical needs. Yeah, Rebecca, exactly. We're going to talk about that here. Rebecca mentions that she had college friends who were pastors' kids or PKs, and they grew up in horrible poverty, which is so common within the church. But so in this, the tithe is a piece of it. Okay, it's a piece of that provision, but the tithe is actually something something completely different. We may talk about that sometime later on this year. But the tithe is something that is given by the Christian in obedience to God. It's not necessarily it's tied to this because of what it is, but the tithe is what we give. The provision for the minister is what they're given from that. It's sort of a piece of it. So we're looking. Don't confuse the two, I guess, is what I really want to say. And what Paul is talking about here is the need and value of the support given to those who have given their lives to the preaching of the gospel. Okay, and I can tell you plainly that it is when I don't know a single person who gets into ministry for the money. Okay, it's just not there. But there is a responsibility within the community of the church to care for those who have done this. Okay, now, this idea of providing for ministers is not necessarily what you consider a hot topic today, but it is a topic that deserves attention, and it deserves serious attention by individual Christians. Now, within the church, over the years, there are many people that I've run into who feel that ministers should hold down regular jobs. And if you feel that way, fine. I am going to challenge that, but just hang on to that. Just kind of file it in the back of your mind. And they say that ministers should hold down regular jobs because that's what Paul did, right? Paul made tents. Even though in the text, what we're going to find out is that Paul clearly does not say that that's what should happen. Paul actually made that choice for a very specific reason, that today we need to be smarter. We need to be smart enough to recognize that reasoning and not put ministers into the same the same gopher hole that he found himself into. Okay, so as Paul was traveling, he made the point not to expect material support from his churches. Now, it's something to remember is that this letter to Corinth was fairly early on in his ministry. This wasn't late in his life. This was a little bit early on, and later in life, he did begin to get materially supported by the bulk of the churches that he was supporting. But in the beginning, he did not want to do that. He didn't make tents throughout his entire ministry. After a while, the tent thing had to go away because the ministry just took up it was just too encompassing. There was too much involved there. So he uses examples like the soldier, the person, the person threshing, the ox. These are people who are doing the work and should expect a portion of the work in response to that. So all ministers, or at least all ministers are, or at least should be, okay, agreed upon by the body of the church. All right. So it is the responsibility of the local community of faith, the local church, to care for the one that they have asked to step out of secular employment and to be the spiritual head of that particular group. Okay, there are obviously denominational churches out there that simply assign a minister to a group, and the church has no voice. The only thing I would say to someone in that situation is you should probably really think about that, because if you don't have a choice of who is going to be speaking spiritual truths into your life, you may want to do something a little bit different about that. Okay. I'll leave that right there. So here are some interesting stats about ministers in the United States. I'm going to talk about this very plainly, but according to salary.com, which is a national organization that kind of categorizes these things, the average salary for a minister in the United States should be, okay, this is what it should be, between $85,000 and $110,000 yearly. Now, if you just went, whoa, what is going on? That's a lot of money. You may think that's a bit high. And at first glance, it really does sound like a lot of money, until you start to look at it with a little bit of understanding. Now, right off the bat, I want to let you know that I am not in this category. I don't even come close to the $85,000 mark. But I am above the national average, which we'll get to here in just a second. So how many of you, when it comes to our wages, if you hold down a secular job, you have the value of what you make, okay, the value that you see, that you bring home, the dollar figure associated with your paycheck, and then you have what is called the value of your compensation package. Now, your compensation package is what it costs your employer to have you there. Now, most employees don't think about this. This is not an uncommon thing. So if you've never thought about this, don't worry. You're in the average, okay? But it costs your employer way more to have you on the books than what you simply take home, okay? So you think about this. You pay taxes. You pay income tax to the state and federal, and you also pay Social Security and Medicare. Now, your Social Security and Medicare contribution is 6.5% of your income. Most people don't know that your employer also has to match that with another 6.5%. So whatever you make, they have to pay an additional 6.5% on top of that just to pay you. Okay, so this grows quite a bit. Okay, and that's if you're just a regular employee. Now, on top of that, your employer has to have, on top of your wage, your employer has to have workers' comp and disability insurance, which is not cheap, especially in New York. Now, if you take just that by itself, you've added somewhere in the neighborhood of 10 to 15% of whatever you make to the value of what it costs to have you working there. Now, keep that at the same time. If you have a retirement plan, your employer has to pay to have that set up, has to pay to manage it, and then has to put money into it, whether if it's a matching plan, if you put $50 in, they put $50 in, or some sort of a percentage, or everyone does it just a little bit different, but that's an additional cost to your employer on top of what they pay you to be there. And that doesn't even come close to the cost of medical insurance. If you get your medical insurance through your employer, whatever you pay, they are paying at a piece of that at the same time. And if you pay a little, they're paying a lot. Okay, so it can cost your employer an additional $10,000+ a year to get you your medical insurance, on top of your Social Security, Medicare, your disability and workers' comp, your retirement plan, all of that stuff. So on average, if you have a job where you get insurance of almost any kind, if you have a retirement plan, and then with everything else factored into it, it typically is about a 140%, between 120% and 140% of what you make is what it costs your employer to have you there, okay? Now, in most small churches, all of that is covered by the salary of the minister. The minister is hired with a salary. Ministers are almost always self-employed, which means that they have to take care of both sides of their Medicare, Social Security, Medicare, which means instead of 6.5, they're now paying 13. They're also trying to take out of whatever they make and do some sort of retirement plan. They also have to typically take care of their own health insurance, because if you add sometimes $10,000 to $13,000 on top of whatever the minister makes to bring home to whatever the insurance is, because most of the time the minister is making just enough so that they can't get any kind of subsidized insurance, which has different pieces attached to that. Now you think about that together with the national average for minister salaries of smaller independent churches is $45,000. Now think about that. Think about the amount of additional expenses that they have to make come out of that. And this is the national average, which means a huge amount of ministers are making well below this. Okay. It's unbelievable. Now, if you attend here at River of Life Fellowship, just understand I'm well taken care of. I make more than this. The church does a great job taking care of me. But there's so much that happens behind the scenes that most people don't pay attention to, because honestly, with your own employment, there are things you don't see. You don't actually see that happening. You don't see it. You don't see it going on. You don't see it. It's not coming out of your check. So it's just kind of like it's a ghost figure, okay, or what's called hidden costs, okay. Yeah. Yeah. Rebecca said that if a pastor needs help navigating all that, she knows a good attorney that specializes in churches and nonprofits. I wonder who that is. probably some attorney in Lowville named Madison or something like that. So there are a lot of factors that come into this. The other thing that most people don't know is that ministers are not eligible for unemployment. So there's so many pieces to this because of the way that salaries are structured. If a minister loses their job, they're not eligible for unemployment. So that means they have to go work someplace else for 20 weeks before they can actually be eligible to receive any kind of aid. I mean, it can be a massive risk to step out of a career that you may have spent a lot of time working on to come to work at a church. But this is why ministers don't do it for the money. It's not, and most guys actually just deal with not making much because they're so dedicated to the work. Now, when I stepped out of my career, I'd spent around 20-something years in the restaurant industry. I was into corporate management, and I was actually just getting ready to move into a fairly lucrative career. I stepped away from six figures to be a minister in a small church in Copenhagen, New York. I actually still have. There's still a guy in Florida who calls me every now and then, just wants to know if the whole minister thing worked out, and if not, come on down to Florida and do some work here. And he always calls me around February. Because living in Tug Hill in February, that's probably the best time to get someone to move. But that's the thing. Another thing that happens is that a large percentage of ministers around the country, you may not know this, your pastor may have had to do this, and you may not even know, they've actually had to opt out of Social Security. So whatever they put in, they could, as long as they're vested, they get to keep that, but they opt out of continually paying into it because they can't afford it. When your contribution goes from 6.5 to 13, that becomes a big piece of the puzzle. And if you need that money to live off of because you're paying so many other things, it becomes very, very difficult. So you end up opting out of that. And it is what it is. When we first started, I had to do that because of the way the tax system was set up. Now I was vested, and we've taken the amount of money that was being paid into that, and we're doing a different retirement thing. So it's not a huge deal. But initially, that was a really, really hard decision. But when you come up to these things, sometimes you just don't know. But you think about this, on average, every Monday morning in the United States, 200 ministers quit their jobs. 200 ministers every Monday morning quit their jobs in the United States. This is a national statistic. You think about the pressure that may be on them. So you have lives of people around you, you have programs, you have kids ministries, you have board meetings, you have prayer meetings, you have Bible studies, you have all of this stuff going on, and you have people within the church, and this is an unfortunate thing, that just believe that they shouldn't have to pay you much. You need to go and you need to get a regular 40-hour-week job. We're going to pay you a token amount because we value your time. And we're not going to give you insurance. We're not going to give you retirement. And you're just going to have to trust that God is going to take care of you, because as the community, well, we only have what we have. So they go through that, and they may struggle through it for a couple of years, but at some point in time, you start really looking at how, as a young person starting out, maybe you're new and you're recently married. Now all of a sudden you're starting to realize that you have a wife to take care of. You have kids that need to get taken care of. Why is it that most preachers' kids have hand-me-down clothes and they don't necessarily play a lot of sports? Or why is it that the family that is basically dedicated their life to taking care of the families in the church, why is it that they are almost expected to live a lower quality of life? Why is it that the pastor can't drive a nice car, or that the pastor can't have a nice house? Now, this may not be your view, but this is a significant view from people around the country. Why is it that needs to happen? It shouldn't. It shouldn't be that way. Scripture clearly is telling us that as the community of the church, as the community of faith, we should be taking care of the people who take care of us. And oftentimes it's just not done. So one of the questions that Christians should be asking themselves in this first little section here is that when the church budget comes around, do you even know what your minister makes? And I know a number of people don't attend my church, and that's fine. And those of you who do attend here, you know that I'm very open with what I make. I don't hide a thing. It's all available to someone. Most churches, I believe, are like that. Do you know if your ministers are being taken care of, or if they've just got a salary? If they just have a salary, and maybe they're going without insurance. I do know a number of guys who have done that and have had significant health issues and all of a sudden are in real serious trouble. What do you expect them to do? You would never, most of us would never step into a job that said, "Hi, we'd like you to spend 7 days a week working for us, and we'd like to give you half of what you're normally making, and we'd like you to pay all of the taxes and things that your employer normally pays. We don't want you to look forward to a retirement, and don't ever think about going on a vacation. And by the way, you have to be on call 24/7. And I hope that's okay. Oh, by the way, try to stay healthy because, it's just important." None of us would go for something like that. But unfortunately, that's what we ask our ministers to do far too often. Now, again, I'm very well taken care of. I love being here. So just to keep putting that out there. Yes, exactly. Most churches disclose all their finances at the end of the annual meeting. A lot of them, though, they will give you a total salary number, but they don't necessarily tell you what the pastor is making. But here's the reality. There is a dollar figure that you, as an adult, that if you do not hit that dollar figure throughout a certain point in time in your life, you're going to have a very, very difficult time as you get older. And the question is the church going to care for you into your old age? Or when you retire and the new person comes in, is it, gee, thanks, but, we can't afford to help you out, even though we should have been helping you out so much earlier than that? This is a difficult question. But as Christians, not as the church, I'm not talking to you as a pastor here, as Christians, it is our responsibility to make sure that those who are caring for us are cared for. So please don't see that as a selfish thing. I'm not asking for anything. Just understand that. But that is a responsibility that we take on when we ask people to step out of secular employment and into the ministry. Even if they feel called, that's great. We still have to do our part. And I will say this: if you're a Christian and you're not a tither, you haven't even come close to doing your part. The most important thing you can do if you really want to support your church, your ministry, and your minister is to become a tither. And we'll get into that. That'll get into down the road. You can look that up for yourself. Those people who try to teach you that tithing isn't for today, I'll just tell you this: they're dead wrong in so many ways. But anyway, that's another thing. So let's get into the next part of here, the relating to those to whom we support. So we've talked about the need to actually support those who are in ministry and taking care of full-time ministry. But now let's talk about how we relate to those people. So Paul in 15 through 19 basically reads like this. Let's see. But I have not made use of any of these rights, nor am I writing now to secure them for myself. I would rather die than be deprived of my ground for boasting. Pay attention to what he's saying here. He says, "For I can boast merely because I proclaim the good news. This I do from inner compulsion. Woe is me if I don't proclaim the good news. For if I do this willingly, I have a reward. But if I do it unwillingly, I still do it simply because I've been entrusted with a job. So then what is my reward? Just this, that in proclaiming the good news, I can make it available free of charge without making use of the rights to which it entitles me." We need to pay attention to that. So he's constantly referencing that the work of the ministry should be supporting the ministry, but he also continually mentions how he denies himself that right. And I'm going to explain to you why he's saying that. Verse 19 says, "For although I am a free man, not bound to anyone's bidding, I have made myself a slave to all in order to win as many as possible." Okay, so Paul's reasoning for funding himself, and this is something that we really need to pay attention to as a church. Paul's reason for funding himself is so that he doesn't have to answer to the petty needs of other people. He doesn't have to do the bidding of others, is what he's saying. See, because when people feel that you work for them, then they want to say in what you do. Okay, so Paul mentions that one of his rewards for not taking money is not being bound to someone else's bidding. So now think about this. If you are a member of your church, right, and you are a tithing member of your church, do you look at your pastor as sort of working for you? This is an important thing to notice. Do you look at your pastor as working for you because you are supporting the church? If you do, you're wrong, and you need to change that viewpoint. Your pastor does not work for you. No matter how much you give, they do not work for you. They are not at the beck and call of you. You do not have the right to try to direct their ministry, their actions, or even what they do with their resources, okay? So, I have known these people my entire life. You know, I try to talk to the pastor, I try to tell them what I think needs to happen, and they don't even do it. I don't think they understand how much I give here. Why does what you give matter in the grand scheme of things? If you have been blessed of God, if God has been on your side to provide you with material blessings, why is it that your action of obedience, tithing that back to the work of the ministry, why is it that that gives you say in anything that the church does with those resources? It doesn't. That we do this out of obedience. This is not a by influence sort of a thing. This isn't if you pay enough on this side, you get some more on that side. It's not money for votes, okay? We tithe, we give because that is what God has asked us to do. And by taking that and leveraging it against the leadership of the church, as if, you know, I can always take this money and go someplace else. I have had those conversations. The way I do it here is I don't know who gives what, and I don't care. I don't care how much you give. I don't care how much you don't give. It makes zero difference to me how I'm going to relate to you, and it makes zero difference to me how much clout you have with me. If you want to develop a relationship with me, fine. If you bring a good idea, great, but your giving is going to have nothing to do with it. But people look at it all the time that way. It's an unfortunate thing. So it's not just that we're supposed to be we're supposed to be supporting those that have given their lives over to the work of the ministry, but there is a way that we should be relating to them. Even in Paul's day, he's letting us know that people who give a lot have a tendency of wanting a lot back. This is an unfortunate thing. But as Christians, is that what we should be doing? See, now, when we talk about people having the idea that their minister is actually working for them, okay, that, you know, I give a lot, so I should have access to a lot. Let me ask you something. Is that pastor allowed to have families? Are they allowed to have a family? Are they allowed to take vacations? Are they allowed to have a part of their life or a time of the day or a day of the week where that does not revolve around the church? I can tell you this. A couple of years ago, Samantha and I took a vacation to Hawaii. And it took a lot of effort for us to get the money up so that we could do that. In the time that we've been married for 23 years. We've taken 2 significant vacations. We went to the Bahamas for a week once, and then we went to Hawaii a couple of years ago. And it's a big deal for us every time we do it. I let people know for months that we were going. Months. We had people here taking care of things. I have a great assistant. I can't remember, it wasn't every day, but it was at least 3 of the 7 days where I got phone calls from people in the church needing something that didn't need to happen. It wasn't an immediate need. They just wanted to know my opinion on something. Probably the worst thing that happened was that I actually picked the phone up. And every time it would ring, I would do the same. I would just look down and really, this is really happening. Or I would get a text message first, and it would sound something like this. I know you're on vacation, but. That should be all you need to know. But this is what I'm talking about. We still have lives. We still have families. We still have hobbies. We still have things we may want to do that don't involve the church. And when people hear that, they think, oh my gosh, how can a minister have something going on in their life that doesn't involve the church? Well, if that's your view, how do you have something going on in your life that doesn't involve the church? Yeah, same thing happens to lawyers. It's exactly it. But this is the thing. Just because you support someone does not mean that they are at your beck and call 24/7. You know, we support the ministry of the church. The church hires a minister. Make sure you're relating to that person like another person, like a husband and a father, someone who has a life that they can't spend their entire life sitting in the office of the church waiting for someone's life to fall apart. Sometimes people call me at night. They start going through a problem, want to know if we can meet right now, and I say no. What do you mean no? And the idea is basically this. This didn't happen in 5 minutes. I can't fix it in 5 minutes. So let's meet at another time where you've had some time to sit and think about it. It's an important piece. The other thing is that a lot of people look at pastoring as though it's working 1 day a week. I gotta tell you, that just makes me laugh. That might make you laugh, but it's really a more common view than you might think. An interesting thing is every minister that I know, every full-time minister that I know will tell you the same thing. Sunday is the easiest day of the week. It's just that simple. As far as days that you serve, maybe you have another day off, but sometimes Sunday is the easiest day of the week. All I have to do is come to church and I get to preach, you know? So this isn't that big of a deal. You think about what happens during the rest of the week. Most people they see church from the lens of Sundays. So they don't actually see the Monday through Saturday kind of events. And you think about this. There's personal study time. You have counseling, between family counseling, marriage counseling, pre-marriage counseling, help. We're going to help. We don't want to get divorced kind of a counseling. You have weddings, you have Bible studies, board meetings, financial planning, building maintenance, Bible school, which is what I'm going through right now. And we're trying to start here at the church. So there's all that going on. You got building projects. Lord help me. I've done 2. I don't ever want to do another one again. You got worship team things. You have prayer meetings, discipleship meetings, ministers meetings, and sometimes a part-time job. Oh, and by the way, you need to prepare a sermon for Sunday, and boy, it better be good because you've got all week to get it done. And then on top of that, you have people who feel like you should be at their beck and call, and it's usually a late call because after all, you kind of work for them. Now, it doesn't take a genius to figure out why 200 ministers leave the ministry every Monday. When you're making somewhere in the neighborhood of half of what you should be making, and all of this is on top of you, and you may have 50 to several hundred people kind of leaning on you in that way, supporting them is one thing. How you relate to them is something that's even more valuable to ministers. How we get related to is so much more valuable to people in full-time ministry than what we get out of it. But when you get talked to like you don't do anything during the week, like if you're going to go on a vacation and someone says, someone get the impression that you've actually done work this week. That's funny a couple of times. But when you get it for years and years and years, you start to wonder what you're doing. And when you get offered another job somewhere, you start asking yourself, gee, is it time to go? Am I done with this? And it's unfortunate how many people leave the ministry way too early. They haven't actually gotten to the place where they're able to actually settle in and find a rhythm. It's horrible when you see it, and I've seen it too many times. But what it really comes down to is not their dedication to the calling. It's the dedication of the community of Christians to the welfare of the minister. That's far too often pushed to the side. Far too often pushed to the side. So another question that Christians should be asking themselves is, how is your pastor doing? Have you ever actually thanked them for what they're doing? In little ways. And I'm not talking about buying them stuff or anything like that. I'm talking about just literally just saying, hey, I just really want to thank you for what you do. And one of the most amazing compliments that I got, and this was a number of years ago. It was an older person. He came up to me and he said, I just want to know. Actually, it was an older lady. She goes, I just want to let you know that I really didn't like the way you did things when I first started listening to you. She goes, but I have to tell you that I've learned more in the last few years than I had in the previous, I think it was 20 or something like that, because they were actually being challenged to learn and to grow. And the thing the person didn't like is this particular person was used to the minister catering to whatever they wanted. I wasn't that guy. Sue me. But now they actually had to learn to stand on their own. They actually had to learn to think about what they were doing, and they realized that they actually liked it. But not everyone has that personality. Do you allow your minister to have as much personal downtime as you do on your own? Are they allowed to have as much of a life outside the church as you do? Because remember, they dedicated their entire life to the church. Are they allowed to have a piece of that life that's outside the church that not only is allowed to exist, but that you support, that you actually pour into that and you help? You know what? You actually value their time to the point where you will not send them a "I know it's your day off, but" kind of a text or those phone calls. It's an important thing. And trust me, your pastor will so much value that coming from you. They'll value it more than anything else. Last thing here is the last point is the benefit of supporting the mission over the man or the woman. All right, so let's look at this. So 20-25 says, that is, with the Jews, what I did was put myself in the position of a Jew in order to win the Jews. With people in subjection to a legalistic perversion of the Torah or the law, I put myself in the position of someone under such legalism in order to win those under this legalism, even though I myself am not in subjection to a legalistic perversion of the Torah. With those who live outside the framework of the Torah, I put myself in the position of someone outside the Torah in order to win those outside the Torah. Although I myself am not outside the framework of God's Torah, but within the framework of the Torah. I know this sounds confusing, but we'll get to the clarity here in just a second. He says, with the weak, I became weak in order to win the weak. With all kinds of people, I have become all kinds of things, so that in all kinds of circumstances, I might save the least, at least some of them. But I do it all because the rewards promised by the good news, so that I may share in them along with others who come to trust. Don't you know that in a race, all the runners compete, but only one wins the prize? So then run to win. Now every athlete in training submits himself to the strict discipline, and he does it just to win a laurel wreath, so that that will soon wither away. But we do it to win a crown that will last forever. So Paul's independence allowed him to hold ministry in a number of different ways. You see, because he was not being supported by others, and because he didn't need to be beholden to their views, their desires, their wants, their wills, he was allowed, pay attention to this, to shape his ministry to fit the needs of the present day and the people that he was around. Now I want to end with this. This is another set of questions, things for you to be thinking about. Does your pastor have the freedom to adjust the ministry of the church to the changing needs of the area? Or are they expected to simply maintain what has always been? Pastor, these are the things that we do for these holidays. Don't ever change them. Pastor, this is how we structure our meeting. Don't ever change it. Pastor, this is the type of worship that we do here. Don't ever bother changing that. These are the instruments that we will allow here. Don't ever try to bring in something different. Oh, and this is the type of Bible that you're allowed to preach out of. Don't ever stray from that, or just because you kind of work for us. So this is what we do. This is the color of the church. This is the kind of carpet. This is the chairs that we sit on. This is what we have always done, and it has worked, and don't you ever change anything, because the only people we ever want to reach are the type of people who are already here. That's what you're saying at that point. Paul knows that that doesn't work. There are going to be people inside of legalism, and to those people, you need to be able to adjust your thinking to how a legalistic person might think so that you may reach them. Then there are going to be people who never grew up with any kind of law or restraint or anything, and you need to be able to adjust your thinking and your attitude to be able to relate to them. So the ministry within the church needs to be able to adjust to the varying needs of the people being reached. Is your pastor allowed to do that? Or are they so afraid of offending such and such family within the church that they wouldn't even dare? And think about that. One of the scariest things that I have ever done was change Mother's Day. Okay? Some of you might just be laughing right now, and that's totally fine. So for years and years and years, even when I was at Faith Fellowship, we did this every year. Every Mother's Day, we would have carnations, and we would bring carnations in, and we would give every mom a carnation, and it was great, and it was wonderful. And you were supposed to preach a message about how amazing moms are, and then on Father's Day, you were supposed to preach a message on how lazy and useless dads are. That's just kind of how it worked. And I just refused. I just absolutely refused to do that. It was boring. It was not valuable, and I didn't want to do it. So what I did is I looked at it and I said, okay, so how do we, as a church, we were getting to the point where our size was a consideration, and like, can we really? How do we do this fairly and justly? And how do we turn this tradition of getting, pay attention, this tradition of getting into a tradition of giving? So what we did is we partnered with CareNet Ministries in Watertown. And this took a little while, and people who know me know that like these types of things frighten me because I know what I'm walking into, but I knew it needed to happen. And so what we do is we partner with CareNet Ministries, and this year obviously we couldn't do it because we were shut down. But what we do is for about a month before Mother's Day, we gather things like diapers and wipes and things like that, things that new moms would need. And then we do a bottle drive for CareNet. If you've ever seen it, they hand out baby bottles and you put money in them and stuff like that. And we do all of that stuff. And then on Mother's Day, we have an ice cream social. People can have ice cream, Sundays and things like that. And then we take all of that material and we donate it to CareNet. So instead of a day of giving, it becomes a day of sowing, a day of outreach. Initially, like the first year we did it, people were like, oh, this is so amazing. This is so great. This is wonderful. Where are the flowers? What do you mean? We get flowers. Nope, this is what we're gonna do now. But we get flowers. My heart starts to pound a little bit more. Okay. So we're not getting flowers anymore? No. We've always gotten flowers. Yep. Now we're giving, and we have the ice cream sundaes. Huh. Next year it was a little less awkward. I think we've done it 4 years in a row now. But now this is what we do. You see what I mean? So we changed the attitude of that particular day. Father's Day, we did the same thing. We used to hand out like little gift cards and little gifts to the dads. And when we stopped doing that and it became a way of giving instead of a way of getting, I am not kidding you, there were probably 5 guys that stopped coming. They only showed up on holidays, especially Father's Day, because they knew they'd get something. But as soon as they figured out they weren't going to get anything, they stopped coming. And what does that tell you? See, it wasn't about giving, it was about receiving. So we changed things. But you see, I had the support of people within the church to do that. And that's why it worked. And that's why now the attitude of receiving has now turned into an attitude of giving. We've been slowly doing these things over the years. They're not easy to do. But is your pastor allowed to do that? Or are they so afraid of the wrath of tradition? And tradition has a wrath to it, trust me. They're so afraid of that they wouldn't dare change anything. I remember being in a church at a funeral, and they were getting ready to do some work somewhere, and they were taking portraits off the wall. And when I walked in, this is a church that someone in my family had been in before, years and years ago, and they looked, and the first thing that came out of their mouth was, "Wow, this is the same color this room was 20 years ago." And kind of my eyes get really big, and I'm thinking, I'm sorry, what? Like, wow, even the pictures are in the same spot. And I'm like that guy, okay? So I went over and I moved the corner of a picture. I just kind of moved it, and it had the brown stain all the way around the frame, and the color of the wall under the picture was very different than the color of the wall outside the picture. And you see, people were that you didn't touch those things. You didn't change what was there. This is what we've always done. This is what we're always going to do, and you are only here to preach. Don't try to change anything because you kind of work for us. You see how dangerous this is? So you get someone called of God, committed to serving the community of faith, and historically, and this isn't everybody, this is a generic idea. They come into the church, and by and large, they're poorly supported. They're expected to get by on nickels and dimes. They're not necessarily verbally supported. They're not necessarily emotionally supported. Their time is not valued. Their recreation time isn't valued. Their life is not valued because they kind of work for you. And then we expect some sort of amazing outpouring of the Holy Spirit within the church because we've hired this person who's given themselves over to the work of God, but we won't allow them to do anything. So we're not going to fund them. We're not going to support what they do in their lives. And the last thing we want them to do is to change anything. We want the newness of God, but we want to do it without giving you more or allowing you to do more. Can you see the lunacy in that thinking? So as Christians, we've really got to ask ourselves some serious questions. Are we righteously and rightfully financially supporting those who we've asked to step out of the world and care for us? Are we emotionally and are we relating to them in a realistic way? Are we valuing both their ministry and their non-ministry lives equally? And at the same time, are we trusting that God has sent this person to us to do something that maybe we haven't been doing before? If we always do what we've always done, we're always going to get what we've always got. And if you want something new from God, you're going to have to give God something new. And maybe that's exactly what that person is there to do. Are you willing to allow them to do that? You see, if you are, great. And if you're not, can you please explain to me why? And what you expect to happen with that mindset. So this is Paul's understanding in 1 Corinthians chapter 9. And I think it's very valuable for us to hang on to things like this and to really examine not only the motives of our pastors, but the motives of ourselves as we relate to those pastors. So again, this isn't me looking for anything. Like I said, I'm very well supported. I love being here. The church is fantastic. But for those of you who are attending other churches, at least think about these in relationship to your own minister. Are you doing what should be done according to God's word? Okay, so if you have any questions, anything you'd like me to touch on in relationship to this, pop that up right now. If not, it's 10:56, so I'm going to wrap things up for today. And again, check out Thinking Man Films, the Patterns of Evidence movies, and tomorrow night from 6:30 to 7:30, live worship, parking lot prayer meeting. Madison's, I'm expecting you to drive up from Florida and be here at least by 6 o'clock. And I would really appreciate it if you would bring me a crab roll from one of those little dirty trucks by the dock, because they're amazing. Anyway, so hope you guys have a fantastic day. We're going to be getting into chapter 10 next week. So if I don't see you, oh yeah, last quick thing. I have decided what's going to happen with the studies. So at the end of June, okay, so starting in July, we're going to be doing the AM study live only. I just can't do both. I really probably should end that a little sooner, but I really enjoy doing this, and I can do it through June. So starting in July, it'll be the morning classes only, but they will be available on YouTube, and the new YouTube channel is getting up. My laptop it's being replaced, so I'm waiting for the new one to get here. I can only work on it here, so I normally would do these kinds of things from home. Hi Vi, good to see you. Patty and good to see you too. So that's what's going on. So as soon as I get my replacement laptop, I will be looking at getting that finished. It's just really hard because like I said, everything I do has to be here, and sometimes I just can't be here. So there you go. Folks, have a great time. Enjoy the day. Let's see. Will the parking lot service be on YouTube or Facebook? We're going to try to do that. David, we're going to try to do that. It won't be like this. It won't be quite this clear. I can't guarantee what the volume is going to be like, but we are going to do our best to make that work because we're going to be outside. So it's going to be with a cell phone or something along those lines, but we're working on trying to figure out how to make that work. So short answer, yes, but I just don't know what the quality is going to be. So there you go. So Thursday night, 6:30 to 7:30. Hope to see you here. You can check it out online through one of these platforms as well. And so there you go. Lord bless you. Have a fantastic week. If I don't see you Sunday, I'll see you Wednesday. Take care now. Bye-bye.